graduated from Pitt State last year, held bats, tagged bats, and she's going to tell us all about everything that she learned and everything that still needs to be learned. Yeah. Yeah.
She's not
Hi everybody, thank you for having me tonight. I am really excited to tell you guys about bats. For the most part, I'm going to be telling you guys about gray bats and one of the research projects we're doing here at Pitt. But I'm going to kind of just go over a few different bat species and just kind of help share the love I have for bats and kind of show that they're not as bad, not as scary as everybody thinks. Okay. So a little bit about me. I am a PSU graduate, like was said. I graduated just back in May with a degree in biology, focusing on wildlife ecology and conservation. While I was here, I had the opportunity to start working with Dr. George on a gray bat project studying the migration. And I'll go over that quite a bit more in detail further into this presentation, but that's what got me started with bats and what led me into my career over the summer. But I am from Grant City, Missouri. A little slower. Okay. Sorry, I talk fast when I'm nervous.
We love you. Don't worry.
I'm from Grant City, which is up in the northeastern corner of the state. It's about 4 hours from here, but I was more than happy to make the drive down for you guys. So like I said, over the summer, I was able to work with the Missouri Department of Conservation doing bat surveys, which just meant all we did was drive around the state and we did population assessments to kind of determine what species are occurring where and try to figure out how many of that species is going to be there based off the data collected over years and years of research. So what we were focusing on was a few species of concern. So those species of concern are just going to be species that the populations are dwindling. They're going to be endangered species, and we want to know if they're still occurring in the area they used to and how many there are if they do. So when we would find a species of concern, we would put little radio transmitters on them and try to track them back to their roost so we could complete roost exit counts, which just meant we sat around a tree or sat at a cave opening and just counted with little clickers in our hand and cameras going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, one back in. Right, just kind of figuring out how many are in that area so we can determine how many bats per species are in that specific roost. Some fun bats that we caught over the summer. This is the eastern red bat. This is by far the most common bat that we caught. So eastern red bats are actually a very solitary species. They live in trees year-round. They don't really want to be around anybody else. And we actually call them powdered donuts because they have, it's kind of hard to see, but right around their head, like a collar, is just like speckling of white. And my boss said that it looked like you took a bat and dumped him in powdered sugar. So these are our little powdered donuts. They're very common throughout the state of Missouri and as well as in Kansas. And they stay in their trees year-round. So in the winter, they don't move to caves, and they're able to do that because they have really thick fur, and that fur continues all the way down their tail membrane, which is called the uropatagium, which allows them to regulate that body temperature throughout the year and keep them nice and warm tucked inside those tree cavities. Very similar looking to the eastern red bat is the Seminole bat. So this is actually not very common in the state. We were very lucky that we just caught one on the northern edge of their geographic range. So these are more of a southern species. And you can tell that they look a lot alike, but their difference is in their coloration. You can't tell them apart by size or any different kinds of measurements in weight. You can only, it's very opinion-based, honestly, and like walking around your group knowing this is a Seminole bat, right? So you can see that the Seminole has a very like bright mahogany color compared to like a dull reddish brown of that eastern red bat. But they're very similar in both their habitat use and what they eat. The main difference is that color, and that's pretty much the only way to tell them apart based off their commonality in geographic range. The next guy is the silver-haired bat. These guys are very common throughout the United States, but we only caught one throughout our summer. I don't know a lot about them simply because we only caught the one at the very beginning of the summer. But I do know that they're actually very slow flyers, but because of their slowness in their flying, they're a little bit more maneuverable. So they can take sharper corners than other bat species can because of their size. They're just a little bit smaller than some of the other bats that we see, but That's about all I know on them. They're pretty cool, I think. This guy, this is the hoary bat. These are one of my favorite bat species. They are like the most widespread throughout the United States and across the Americas. You can find them all over the place, down into Mexico, up into like halfway through Canada. And they're actually one of the largest bat species we have in the United States. I know in Missouri it is the largest bat species, and their wingspan is anywhere from 13 to 16 inches long. So like that's actually my hand in the photo, and that bat covered my entire hand. They are a lot bigger than what the picture is showing. And then this guy is an Indiana bat. So this is one of our species of concern that we were looking at over the summer. They are a federally endangered species that have been facing some major population declines due to both white nose syndrome, which is this really bad fungal disease that's killing a lot of bats. It's really sad. And then human disturbance. So something really fun about these Indiana bats is that while they are a tree roosting species in the summer, they're actually one of the species that also switch into a cave roosting species in the winter. So all the other ones I've shown you so far stay in trees year-round, whereas this guy decides to switch back and forth based off the weather. These guys are also very social species, like the gray bats, which I'll tell you about here in just a second. So they will always be found in colonies rather than pretty solitary like the other bats. So some random bat facts. Bats are mammals, even though they can fly. Not a lot of people kind of keep up with that. But they are the only mammal capable of sustained flight. So these are actually what we call a chiroptera species, which means hand wing. And so when you stretch their wing out, their bones shape into like a hand spread out. And with like the spread of those bones and then the wing membrane that attaches to all of them is what allows them to stay in the air rather than just glide like other mammals. These are a nocturnal species. They start leaving their roost right around sundown. So when we're all out there getting those last minute sunset pictures, these guys are waking up for the day and starting their hunt throughout the night. These also eat insects. So while they do eat some mosquitoes, most bats are actually going to be eating a lot of like soft-bodied insects, such as like mayflies and moths, and then you will see them eating a few beetles every now and then. So they have a large range in the insects that they eat based off the different species, but unfortunately not as many of the mosquitoes get ate as you would want. But they do eat those mosquitoes and help keep down insect populations. And they actually eat a lot of corn earworms. So that actually, with the bats eating those earworms, saves farmers like billions of dollars a year just by simply not having them eating as much corn. And then bats typically have one pup annually. Sometimes some of the larger species will throw out a twin, but most of the time you can count on them only having one offspring per year. Now we're going to focus on our sweet little gray bats. So gray bats are a federally endangered species. They were listed back in 1976, and today their main threats are going to be white nose syndrome, like I said earlier, and then as well as human disturbance to their roosts and hibernacula. So whenever somebody like goes into these roosts, it starts disturbing the bats, especially if it's during the winter when they're saving up those energy reserves. And if those bats are disturbed, it'll cause them to fly around during the winter when they should be resting a lot more, which will deplete those energy reserves, as well as it will dislodge the pups who don't really know how to fly yet. So then we're having loss from that, as well as loss from this fungal disease that both bats really can't handle yet. Gray bats specifically are a cave obligate species, which means they only live in caves year-round. So gray bats like areas where there are lots of limestone, because limestone makes lots of caves, and sources near water, because that's where they're going to be hunting the most. So for the conservation for these gray bats, we have done a lot of protection of their known roosts and hibernacula, which includes just fencing off or putting gates across roost exits, as well as just keeping the location of many of these caves and roosts kind of quiet, and just kind of making sure that we're protecting them as much as possible, not going in and doing a ton of surveys and only doing what's necessary. There's also been a lot of corridor maintenance. So bats don't like areas where fly through a lot of areas with a lot of trees. They like open paths, so like road cuts through the trees or something down to their water sources. So keeping up those corridors and making sure that bats have an easy flight path towards their hunting grounds is going to help them kind of build those energy reserves a little bit easier without having to maneuver around all these trees, which they're not that good at. And then a really fun fact about them is that 98% of the gray bat species hibernates in a total of 15 caves throughout the Missouri, Ozark, and Appalachian range. The only downside to that is that if they're in a small area, there's a lot of bats in a lot of areas, so if they're having disturbance or having that white nose go through those caves, they are at a high risk for fatality through that. But that also means that millions of bats can be, like thousands to millions of bats will be in one area at a time, which is a really cool sight to see. Now we're going to talk about our research project. So here in Southeast Kansas, I have been a part of a research project with Dr. George for the past 3 years, where we have been studying the migration of gray bats. So here in Pittsburg, we have the only known colony of Kansas of gray bats in the entire state. So this is a range map of the gray bats. As you can see, they're typically found in what we call the deciduous hardwood forests in the karst regions, which really just means lots of caves and lots of trees. Not really what Kansas looks like. But we were lucky enough that somewhere along their history, a colony of gray bats decided to come over into Pittsburg and roost underneath our city and have a maternity species colony here. They're also a migratory species, which is what we're trying to figure out. So these travel biannually between their summer breeding grounds, which is what we have here in Pittsburg, and then their winter hibernacula, somewhere in the Missouri Ozarks or Arkansas. However, very little is known about the key facts about their migration, where exactly they're going, how long it's taking them to get there, if they're stopping along the way, or if they're having direct flight. Which is why, for this research project, our goal was to track the fall migration of the Pittsburg gray bat colony, to describe the routes that they're taking, and then as well as link the Kansas colony to specific hibernacula. To do that, we are using the MODIS network. So MODIS is a collaborative research network that uses radio telemetry with digitally coded tags that allows us to track where these different species are going using radio waves and different towers set throughout the United States and as well as other countries. This is a worldwide project and is found all over the place. And a really fun thing about MODIS is that all data is open access and freely available to any curious researcher. So technically, at the end of this, we could hop on to modis.org and look up and see if we can see where any of the bats that we have tagged this year are flying or not. So how are we doing this? So the first step is that we have to capture our bats. So we capture our bats using a harp trap, which is just that weird looking thing in the corner. So the bats will just fly right into that, and then you'll try to avoid it, but most of the time they'll avoid one line, hit the other, and fall into that bag. Perfectly harmless. They just kind of fall in there and crawl in and huddle together. And then we'll go ahead and collect what we call standard biometric data, which is just going to be like their wing condition, which will help us determine if they've had white nose syndrome or not, as well as forearm length, which will help us determine gray bats are actually really easy to tell what species they are because they have their key characteristics. But for some species, that forearm length will help us determine between different species, as well as their sex and weight. So this just helps us keep an idea of how the population's doing in Kansas and just kind of learn more about bats as we go along. And then we'll go ahead and attach MODIS tags to the backs of gray bats. So how we're going to do that, you can clip hair. We don't like doing clipping. It's actually very scary. If I'm going to be scared of anything working with bats, it's going to be clipping hair. So what we're going to do is use eyelash spoolies, which is like a makeup applicator. Part the hair, we're going to give them a hairdo, and then glue that transmitter directly onto their back, and then fold the hair back over so it's holding that transmitter in like a little hug, kind of. And then once the glue is dry, they're free to go, and that transmitter will stay on for a few weeks, allowing us to collect our data as they go on their migration. And then we did go ahead and deploy MODIS nodes. So these nodes are going to be placed at hibernacula as well as the roost exit here. And we'll be able to see as a bat flies by, it'll send a signal to that node, which helps us determine when the bats are leaving Pittsburg, as well as if we're lucky enough to have a node at whatever cave they're going to for hibernation, show when they're getting there. So this has been a multi-year project. So those methods were first started back in 2023. So last year for 2024-2025, we decided to just continue doing what we had done the year before, but as well as put notice nodes at specific hibernacula throughout the state of Missouri. And then instead of collecting all of our bats and putting nodes on at one time, we split it between early and late October. In 23-24 year, we found that come the end of October, all we were catching were male gray bats. So we weren't able to collect hardly any female data, and so we were wondering if are females leaving sooner, or are the females going to a different cave than the males? There was just more questions arose as we were doing our information, so we split it up a little different, so that way we could have a more even collection of female and male bats in our data. And then as well as those nodes to the 8 known hibernacula throughout Missouri. And some of the results that we have found is that the gray bats do leave Pittsburg somewhere between the end of October and the 1st of November, and that females typically leave a little bit sooner in the year than the males do. And over the last 2 years, we found that the majority of the colony here in Kansas travels east somewhere into the Missouri Ozarks. So this picture here is just a little description of showing the bat leaving Kansas and going past the receiver stations we have over in Prairie State Park. And it shows the directionality in which they're flying, which is just a little bit northeast. But that helped us determine what caves we really needed to be looking at for where most of this colony is probably going. Which, last year, we had one little female bat who left Pittsburg, Kansas, and flew 107 miles in 6.5 hours to a cave in the middle of Missouri. There was 4 bats detected at that one cave. Yeah, that's just a 700-mile journey, and she did that in 7 hours. So that allowed us to determine where they're going, but we still don't know how long, or we know how long, excuse me. We don't know if they're flying with groups of bats, or rather than at a time. Are they stopping? Are they following waterways, direct flights? We're still not sure about all of that, but we were able to determine at least one location. We also have had 4 bats shown flowing southeast into Arkansas. Both years we had bats appear to be doing this, so it does look like our colony is splitting up and going into complete different directions during hibernation, and then every year coming back to that same roost colony here in Kansas. We also found out that weather patterns do affect gray bat migration. So the first year we did this at the end of October, we had a really big cold snap come through. So we were getting a lot of data, and then the temperature dropped really dramatically, and so did all of our data. We weren't seeing anything coming through. But then as soon as that weather started to pick back up, then we had more bat activity, and then we're able to see when most of our bats left for their migration. So we were able to show that the temperature does actively mess with when bats can leave during their migration. And if it's colder, these poor little guys aren't really made for that. That's why they hide in caves all year long. So they have to kind of make their migration based off temperature, and it's all very fluctuating. And then this year, we are putting those nodes were put down into Arkansas, as well as similar node placement as last year with nodes in Missouri and here in Kansas. And then we applied not 20 tags, we actually ended up doing 24 tags. I just forgot to change that. So in total, we have done, 64 bats tagged in the last 3 years. So hopefully we're going to get a little bit more information on where these bats are going with more specific data on seeing if those bats are returning to that same cave that we found last year, and seeing if we can identify where in Arkansas those bats are flying. So some conclusions is that, yes, bats are affected by the weather pattern, and that our colony is traveling to both the Missouri Ozarks and into Arkansas. And then that cave that they're at is called Coffin Cave. And so we do know that they're going to Coffin Cave as well as other locations, because not all of the bats that we tagged were located going to Coffin Cave. Unfortunately, we did have technical issues last year and not all of our nodes worked. So some of those bats that we tagged could have been going to some of those caves that we just weren't lucky enough to get information at. So repeating it this year will help determine if we just missed the data with our misfunctional nodes. But then thankfully, with the use of this MODIS network, we're going to be able to redo what we were not able to get last year, as well as understand the migration of other migratory animals. This is very commonly used on birds. We just made the fun decision to try to use it on bats. Because this is a research thing, I have to put my acknowledgments up there. Thanks to all those that helped. I don't really know how long or short that was. I guess we're gonna get you guys out in a good time. Go enjoy the bouncy houses or whatever. Yeah, we have some questions and I'll take any of them after. Okay, right up there at the back of the brain.
Do you have any indication if the bats fly back to Pittsburg or?
Yeah, over the years, so each time we trap bats, we put a band on them, and that's just gonna have like a specialized numerical code that is only specific to that one bat. And we have had band returns come like caught year after, not really year after year, but like years after being tagged. That like, so it'll say like PSU bat, whatever number we have.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we've had bats returning, so we know that they're coming back to this one route only. Yeah.
How long do the MODIS tags stay active for?
It's a tricky game we have to play because some MODIS tags are actually solar powered, but these guys fly at night, so we can't use the sun to charge our tags. So these ones actually have a battery life. So the battery life is like however many beeps, like signals per second, or however long we decide to set it, is kind of going to determine how long those batteries stay active for. I don't remember the exact number we use. That's definitely a Dr. George question. But it is for like about 2, maybe 3 weeks, which is about the same lifespan as the glue we're putting on. So we're playing a fun little game of what will give out first, the glue or our transmitter. Yeah.
You mentioned that one of the earlier questions you were trying to solve was if the female bats leave earlier or go to a different place. In other species, have you seen that during migration the females go somewhere else? Like, is that something you've seen before?
So the gray bats are the only thing that I specifically have done any migration research on. Bats in general are kind of an understudied species, so I'm not entirely sure if that same pattern has been found. We don't have any like definitive proof that our females are leaving, like all of our females are leaving sooner, or if we just were catching a crap ton of males at the end of October for some unknown reason. Because last year, we actually had, at Coffin Cave, we had a male and a female pair show up at Coffin Cave around the same time, rather than like the beginning of migration, 2 females and then 2 males. So we weren't able to determine what it is, but based off our collection here, it does seem like that. Other species, I have no idea. Yeah, the blue.
Is the white nose fungus, are they getting it under control? Is it less problem than it was, or is it about the same?
As far as I know, kind of the same. We definitely understand it a little bit better now. It was introduced to America back in 2006, and then it just spread across the United States and has been affecting a lot of different bat species. But through that time, we have been able to like understand it more and understand how it spreads. And so there have been like precautions for spreading, and a lot of that is done through like the human interaction. But unfortunately, it's spread through physical touch. So like the gray bats and the Indiana bats that are like colony species, they like to like roost really close together. So if they get white nose, it's going to spread really quickly. So it's just kind of a hope for the best, but we're doing our best to understand it and mitigate what we can.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, back there in the camo.
So what gives the white nose syndrome its name? Is it a fungus that specifically affects the airways, the nose, and gives it like a white appearance?
Yeah, so whenever a bat is like has active white nose, it kind of makes like this white fuzzy film across their face. And it mainly just messes up a lot, like it makes them wake up a lot more during the night or during their roosting periods, during hibernation. And it like will completely cause them to like deplete their energy reserves. It just throws off pretty much how they function entirely, which has just led to a lot of mortality. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
I have two questions. One, what are the natural predators of these bats? Do they have natural predators?
Yeah, owls a lot of the time. Whenever we were tracking over the summer, actually, if we would hear an owl, it was like kind of, oh no, because sometimes it was thought that they would try to get a bat out of our net for us. But I didn't really see a lot of predation throughout the summer, but they do face a lot of predation from other animals. But they've also had a lot of problems with wind turbines and flying into the wind speed.
What can community members do to contribute to the conservation efforts of these bats?
That was a really good question. Really just kind of one, staying away from any roost calling, like any roost that you know of, and as well as just kind of helping with the research and maybe like helping towards funding, just being active, being knowledgeable and spreading the word and just letting people know what's going on. Okay, yeah, right, that's
What's the stability of the Pittsburgh population?
I think it's pretty stable, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's, this year we got the highest count so far, so it's stable, it may be increasing.
I wasn't here for that count, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I mean, from what I know, it's been pretty stable throughout the years. Yes, ma'am.
I'm assuming, because we don't know a whole lot about white nose, but there's no way to like treat the colonies who've had it.
Not that I know. You have a question?
Yeah, Dr. George, what is that number?
More than 2,000. 2,000, which is a lot, but that's minuscule compared to some of the colonies in Missouri that have tens of thousands in one cave.
It seems like when you do research, you always get more questions than answers. So what's your next, would you change the way you did this? And two, what's your next thoughts, or if you had to do a study, what would you do?
Okay, well, the first part of your question, like when I change something, is that what you asked?
Yeah, on this, is there something you would change in retrospect? And secondly, what are you going to advance on to, or what study would you do if you could do it?
Mm-hmm. I definitely would like to continue migrational studies, just because that's where my focus has been for the past few years, and that's kind of what I'm like fixated on and what I want to understand the most. With this project specifically, I'm sure there's something we could probably go back and be like, oh man, I wish I changed that. But as we faced different like hurdles throughout the few years, I think we've done a good job at adapting how we're doing our research and just kind of trying to fix what we can while we're going.
I have another one, and I wish there was a representative from the city of Pittsburgh here, but in my volunteer work, I have learned from some of the city of Pittsburgh workers that they know about disturbing these roosts, and they are very cautious.
Yes.
With these roosts. So how did that happen? Did you guys go to them, or because they know? This is Parks and Rec that I'm referring to.
Yeah, they've been doing some like system maintenance down there over the years, and so like they're not hard to find. Like the bats will, like if you're in the tunnels, don't go in the tunnels, but if you're in the tunnels, you'll see them roosting. And so I'm sure somewhere when they were, because the colony was first found in like the 1960s, and so somewhere along the way during those renovations, they've probably just found them and communicated with whoever was in charge of monitoring that colony to figure out what they needed to do to be both constructive towards the city of Pittsburgh, but as well as cautious for that species.
You mentioned, this is probably getting farther outside of your area of expertise, but you mentioned that a lot of preventing like conservation work is like physically barring off those cave systems so that people can't disturb them. But if those, like my understanding is that they're using like the storm drain system, sewer system, those structures. How you can't really block those off because that kind of defeats the purpose of having the system for the storm drain.
kind of like how do you
how do you balance
keep-
that?
A lot of the times it's just kind of hoping and like keeping the amount of people that know there's a colony in a storm drain or like in some culvert to the minimum. I mean, people are gonna find out, like, the bats have been here since the 60s. A lot of people know that that's where they are around here, but as well as just making sure that you're keeping out, maybe keeping your friends out of the storm tunnel system, and just kind of working with your city to see what is the best option for each place.
So the bats that are here in the summertime travel to Coffin Cave in the wintertime
Yes,
and then come back here in the springtime.
that's what we've been finding.
How many years does that go on? What's the lifespan of that?
Oh, each bat is gonna be a little bit different. It's probably varies by species as well. That's probably also one of the unknowns. I think we had a band return here in Pittsburgh of like, what, 13-year-old
Last year we had 13-year and 11-year. They're long-lived.
Yeah, and that's like one of the longer, like, for sure, we know exactly how long it was.
It had to be that, just if they just reproduce one per year.
Okay.
So, I know I asked you a few questions and beforehand, and this was something that I was kind of hoping to see a little bit throughout. But what are some of your personal questions of what is left to learn about bats? Because you said that there's a lot that isn't known about them. So what are some of your personal questions that you'd love to have answered?
I would really like to understand like their day-to-day flight patterns, like kind of exactly where they're leaving to go hunting. We know that they're leaving their roost and kind of heading towards a body of water for the most part, because they have to drink, and that's where a lot of their food is gonna come from. But like whenever we do our research here, we almost always have bats that are picked up every single night before they leave the roost here, picked up over in Prairie State Park, and it's like, what are they doing over there all night and then coming back here, you know, like, I want to understand exactly, kind of try to track where they're going, but that's pretty hard to do. I just think it would be fun to know, like, on a day-to-day basis, what are they up to when they're out flying? Yeah.
Are they the only species around Pittsburgh?
No.
So there are a number of different kinds of bats?
Yeah, we have a few different. Arguably one of the most common is going to be a big brown bat. So if any of you have ever had a bat in your house, it was most likely a big brown. Not harmful. They like to live in human structures. They've adapted to that. So yeah, we have some of those big browns. We've had a few eastern reds around here. There was a capture of a little brown bat one time, which is another federally endangered species. So we have a good mix around, but because the Kansas colony, yeah, the gray bat colony is just kind of special since they're the only one in Kansas and we have so many to be able to research at a time, that's what we focused on.
You alluded to the fact that bats are killed by wind turbines.
That's where I was going.
In Crawford County, there is some, I don't know if I call it controversy, but there is growing discussion of whether or not the county wants wind turbines and where those wind turbines would be placed. Are you familiar, is there some kind of a locator or map as to where the Pittsburgh colony bats fly out into Crawford County, which might be a problem with the wind turbine?
Because like that would possibly be answered like if we did know exactly where they were flying every single night. I don't know exactly where they're going for their hunting every night, and so as far as I know, there's not an exact map of our bats are leaving here and going here. So it's just kind of up in the air at the moment, but.
What would you suggest to decision makers about placing wind turbines in Crawford County?
I definitely think talking through it with a lot of different people, like a lot of different conservationists, just different aspects, and getting as many points of view as you can, and just coming to the best decision for what you think would be necessary for your area, as well as for your environment in general. I can't control what other people's decisions are, but it's entirely up to them and learning what they can from other people.
Would it not be appropriate to get more information about where the bats in fact, are in Crawford County before the decisions on turbines would be made?
It would be nice to have that information, but it's hard to gather that kind of data. As part of what we're seeing is because we see that they're all going in, like a lot of them are in like Prairie State Park for a while, but like there's only so many nodes and so many towers out, and it's very, very expensive to do that kind of research. So like in a perfect world, we would know all of that information before we were able to make the decisions to like put up a wind turbine or any other kind of construction. But at the moment, we don't have that possibility.
Well, bats turn pretty quick. Is there any evidence that they've ever been killed by wind turbines?
Yeah, people have jobs where they literally just go out to wind turbines and find.
They find bats at the
Yeah.
bottom of the windmill there?
Right. I'll comment on that too, with Steve's question. I don't know about the wind turbines in Crawford County, but in Barton County, Missouri, there have been some wind farms, and the power companies and consulting firms, there's a lot of active surveys that go on before, during, and after, and it's an active area of research. We don't have access to that data, a lot of it's proprietary, but there's a lot of folks worried about it and a lot of folks working on it right now, looking for solutions. So we don't know how to answer that directly, but they certainly do kill bats. We don't know how many, or anything like that, so.
That'd be nice information to have specifically in Crawford County.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, okay, so I want you don't probably have the answer to this, but like, why are they in Pittsburgh but not in Schermerhorn Cave, which is like a beautiful cave for bats, and why wouldn't they go there?
I could not tell you. I have not done a full, I have not done a
I just
survey.
feel like if I were a bat, I would prefer that to a storm drain.
Yeah, apparently it's just cave-like enough. The environment of it is enough like a cave that they decided that it was suitable over the years and keep coming back. So I guess it's doing something right down
So,
there.
and is the idea that like in the winter they have to be so densely populated for the heat and deeper caves that are more temperature, and then in the summer so that there's more food availability, they go farther away? Is that the idea of why people to come here?
Yeah, kind of just spread out in general after hibernation and go back to their own maternity roosts. But in the winter, they all are collecting in specific areas. Because in the winter, that is where like their food abundance is going to be like the most at, as well as everybody else is there, and they need to keep warm. So they're going to where like the most body heat is really. Yes.
I think you might have answered this question, but I'll try it again. Wind turbines seem to kill a lot of bats. In fact, I think bats is the leading animal they kill.
Okay.
In your tagged animals, you get reports of tagged animals, and you have access to wind turbine information. They hunt over these things looking for bats. Do you get any information back from animals you tag?
I personally do not get any information back on if like a Modus tagged bat or if just abandoned tagged
Those are
bats.
live bats. I'm thinking underneath the turbines.
Yeah, well, if it's tagged with either a Modus tag or an armband, like they would be able to tell whether it's.
You got people looking for that, don't you?
People are out doing those surveys, but I'm not getting the
But
information.
you haven't got any reports back that you're.
No, it wouldn't come to me. It would go to whoever's in charge of that survey and different like higher ups. I'm not high enough in the bat world to be getting that information.
Well, just thinking, there's several turbine fields around here. And I just wonder if you have access to go in and walk on the ground and find dead bats.
I'm sure if I talk to the right people and, set a pretty please, I might be able to, but most of the time that's gonna be left to whatever company is in charge of doing those surveys.
And then another question, the white nose syndrome, has it declined, has it gotten worse? What's the consensus now?
It's been a little bit different on different species, so I can't really say like it's declining or getting worse. We're really just studying it to see what we can learn and find out if there's ways to help decrease
At one time, it was talked about a lot, now I don't hear much about it.
I think it was definitely talked a lot more whenever it was like first coming over and it was like, oh no, like what is this? And we did not understand it. So there's a little bit more understanding now and a little bit more research has gone in. People know kind of how to mitigate, like there's more we have more action towards it, and so I think that's just like slowly decreased the amount people need to talk about it. Like it still needs talked about, but it's not like this big, super, super scary thing now that we don't understand. We've learned about it, so the talk of it to the general public has probably
The
decreased.
last thing I remember hearing about it was that in Europe, it doesn't affect the bats.
It originated in Europe, so maybe like
they
they.
were talking about trying to figure out what it is, if I got the story right, what it is about the European bats that are immune to the white nose syndrome. They were talking about seeing, hey, get some of that over here.
That'd be nice.
And, you know,
I don't know. I haven't read that article. I'll have to
maybe
look it
that's an
up.
all wet story, but I think that's right.
I'll have to look up that one.
Can I comment on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so white nose syndrome was introduced from Europe, and those bats have co-evolved with it, so it doesn't really hurt them. It was novel to these bats. It's been spreading. It's been picked up in pretty much every state now. It showed up in Kansas in 2018. And gray bats are doing okay, but 3 species of bats that were super common in the eastern U.S. have been totally devastated. And it's the tricolored bat and the little brown bat and the northern long-eared. 2 of them are listed as federally endangered now, and 1 of them is proposed. But the Endangered Species Act is political, and it's very difficult to protect these species. And so this is Braidy didn't talk about this, but we've got another species of bat that lives here that's been disappearing from here locally, the tricolored. And so bats are in trouble, and this is the gray bats are probably a success story. They've come back since protections were put into place in the 1980s. They could be delisted at some point, but we've got some other species that are getting totally still wiped out by white nose. So it's definitely still going on, and it's still something that the state monitors for, and that we help monitor for at Braidy. Okay.
Yeah.
Does white nose affect them year round, or more in their winter location or their summer location? When are they having babies? And methods of tagging, is there anything better than your 6-week window?
Okay. White nose is going to be affecting them like year round. Most of the time they're probably picking it up in their winter hibernacula, because that's where a lot of bats from a lot of different areas are coming from different caves and a lot of like interacting with other species and coming back into one area. So that's probably where it's getting the most spread. But then the bats are going to go back out to wherever their summer roosts are and spread it there too. So it's just this continuous spread, which is why it moved across the United States so fast. Okay, and then
Babies, when are they having them?
babies, they'll have their babies when they get back here, so kind of like very beginning of summer, and then the babies will stay with their parents, like with their mother throughout the summer, and then go off for migration on their own in like this time period. And then it was one of those
The tagging methods, like, is there anything better than the glue?
So far from what I've seen and who I've worked with, gluing is pretty much the only way to keep it down with like the shape of their body and just what you're dealing with. So kind of how you apply the tag might vary a little bit person to person, company to company. I've worked with people that prefer to do hair clippings and like put the hair like as close to the body as you can get and then glue the tag and then glue the hair back on top. But then I've also met people that think that if you cut the hair off, even though you're gluing it back on, it might mess with like how they regulate their body temperature. So it's not an exact correct answer. It's really just dependent on who you learned from and what you think is best for the given scenario.
Thank you.
Yeah, in the back.
So offspring migrate on their own without any learning time with the parent?
So they like learn how to fly throughout the summer with their
But
parent.
where they migrate, that's hardwired in them, or?
No one knows. Like they could be going with their parent. That's part of what maybe we'll find out through our research and further research from other people. But I would suspect, if I had to guess, that they're probably like going with their parent, but they could also just be leaving at any point and following the other pups and decide where they want to go on their own. Who knows? Yeah.
Why do you wear gloves for babies? Why do you wear masks?
So the masks, it was just dependent based off like COVID for a while. We weren't entirely sure if that would like affect the bats, like health to them. So it was both helpful for like us and for the bats. The gloves we have to use not only for our protection, but for the bats' protection. So we don't want to be like rubbing all of the oils on our hand onto them. So it's just safety precautions for both humans and bats. Yes, yeah.
Is there any research going towards like
solving the white nose like fungi problem? Like, are we doing trials like to see if like there's a medication or like if there's something that can solve it? Like, do you know if there's any trials going on or if it's just like?
I bet someone somewhere is doing that kind of research. I'm not, that's not my forte. But there's been a lot of research going into white nose and how it develops and how it's affecting different bat species and just trying to see what we can figure out. Yeah,
Do the bats just follow the boats then?
they could be.
So what makes them go to Prairie State Park other than just hang out over the city of Pittsburgh where there's lights and bugs and?
And I'm not sure, that's like the question earlier was like what I would like to understand, why they're choosing where they're flying at night, why we're picking them up at Prairie State Park. That behavioral type information is not really understood, it's not been studied.
Is it just because there's a transmitter there and maybe not somewhere else?
We have like 3 towers around Pittsburgh, so it gets all pretty much covered, but we almost always find that the bats are more so over at Prairie State Park rather than picked up at the other towers. We might get like a clip, but we have much more activity over at Prairie State Park. Could not tell you why though, it's just an interesting thing we found. Maybe because that's the direction that most of them are going for their migration, they're just like starting that journey, like figuring out where they're going. That's just a complete guess though, if I'm being honest with you.
Some of them do hang out around Pittsburgh. You can sit at Lakeside Park and they'll be flying above the lake and swooping down to get water from the lake. They do stay around and eat insects in Pittsburgh.
I have a question, and I'm sorry my neighbor is not here because I'm curious what you think about this. 2 years ago, he put up a bat house behind his garage, and he had it low, so then he took it up higher. We still don't see any bats back there, but I'm curious, what type of bat would that draw, and does that work? Because it's a mosquito problem.
Most likely, since it's like swimming in a backyard, it sounds like, I would assume big brown bats, just because they like human structure. That's just what they've gone for the most part. But that would be my best guess, because a lot of the gray bats are going to be like with the rest of their colony. Red bats, maybe, like if they're flying through the area, are going to be around here, but they like to live more so in tree bark. And so it really just depends, but my best bet would be around.
Bat Conservation International in Austin, Texas sells bat houses.
Yeah, it's become more popular. It's a spreading thing. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but I know it's kind of been taken on.
Hey Braidy, can you pull up the notice thing and see if we can actually see any of your data? Probably. If it works. Do you have the Wi-Fi? Hope so. I don't know. Dr. George, this is different than the last time I was on here.
You just click on Explore Modus Data, and they've updated the interface, and it may not work well. But
What is it, State Park one? 15 to 20.
species.
I'm assuming I'm doing this right.
Yeah, you are.
So these motives, they pick up birds or bats or other animals?
Yeah, so Modus is used for any migratory species. Oh, hey, great, I noticed, that's us!
Yeah, just a couple nights ago, so.
So yeah, we don't have the information for tonight, like it's gonna have to be uploaded onto the website, but we do know that at least some of the bats that we tagged are being active and picked up over at Prairie State Park.
If you zoom in on the map, it's kind of messy there. But if any of you guys, you can go and explore and learn about Modus, but all these lines connecting, those are animals that were tagged of various species that have flown through southwest Missouri. There's thousands of stations now. But I mean, it's, a lot of birds, mostly birds. But we're learning so much about migration through this tool. It's really amazing.
But yeah, it's any species that migrates over long distances that's tagged with Modus is picked up by them.
Well, is this an accurate depiction of the fact that there's more migration in our area than other areas of the country? Or is that just because we're on the system here?
Yeah, there's not more
That's just
necessarily.
the
than you are.
highlighted mode that is.
I would assume part of it has to do with the fact that the Rocky Mountain, like the Rocky Mountains go through just on the other side of us. So it could be just that because of the Rocky Mountains being there, there isn't as much migration to the western part of the United States versus the information that the western states might have in comparison to our data. Because you pulled up Kansas Modus, right?
This is like all notice, I just happened to like initially click on that Prairie State Park one, since I know we get a lot of hits there when we have tags out.
Yeah, those lines are all from one station. All those lines there are ones that were picked up at Prairie State Park.
So we could view us as.
But no, not gray bats, none of that, that's not showing gray bats.
Totally different ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would work. You could see all those different
I'll only take another question or two. If anybody has any more questions?
There was.
This is like one from California.
It gives you the lines to go
Sorry.
through.
There was a structure built for the bats years ago. I don't know, 60s or 70s. Is that still around?
Here,
So, yeah, in Pittsburg. There was like a big, I don't
I heard
know,
about this.
15 by 15 building. It was up off the ground.
Yeah, I don't know, it's
Okay.
not around anymore, so I'm thinking it probably wasn't successful, at least for gray bats, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for Brady?
When they put a specific species on the endangered list or the watch list, what does that do for that species that they don't do for the other species?
I mean, and maybe it's just kind of like knowing that we need to look more into why that species is declining and seeing if there's any extra type of, like, not mitigation, that's the word I think of that. Like anything that we can do to help support the species a little bit more, figure out why they're declining so much faster than another species. It just helps us know that we need to keep an eye on them a little bit more and that they're really struggling. Whereas like the species that aren't on there, they don't really need the help because their populations aren't declining, so they're doing fine without us.
It offers federal protection and federal money.
Okay.
Yeah, for federal. Any other questions? Let's give Brady a hand. Stick around for more questions if folks have.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much everybody for coming. Happy Halloween.
Questions, let her go home.